Hello, everybody. Today we have the honor and the privilege of talking to Melissa Tate, who is the author of the book you can see behind you, Choice Privilege. And we have been really excited to talk to her.
Yeah, because you're like the whole package.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be on the show, and thank you so much for reaching out to me. And I love what you guys are doing. So
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Melissa, you're not afraid of sticking your hand into the wasp's nest? we just watched your speech on critical race theory.
Yes. Okay.
What about that? That was
Yes.
wild.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So, the weird thing is I've never been somebody who's out there and outspoken and love to speak in front of people or in front of a camera. I've always been a very reclusive, well, not reclusive really, but somebody who's more of a behind the scenes person, because I ran my business and it was in e-commerce and it was in the beauty industry. And, my husband was always encouraging me to do videos and talking to my customers. And I was like, no, I'll just hire somebody else to do that. Cause I kind of had a fear of like talking in front of a camera. And I almost failed speech class because I had such bad stage fright as I was growing up. So I never saw myself standing on a stage or speaking to cameras or just being an outspoken person. But obviously, everything that has been happening in the world has, put a fire in me to start speaking. And I feel that the Lord has given me the ability to do it. And I've just been feeling that God gave me this voice and gave me the ability to speak, and it kind of reminds me of the story in the Bible about Moses when he was saying, well, I don't know how to speak, like I stutter and that I've had all those internal conversations. Like, I don't like speaking in front of camera. I get serious stage fright. And I've been able to work through those fears and just get out there because I'm like, this is so important and I can encourage other people and be a voice and so forth. So it's interesting that I'm doing this.
Well, any of that internal stuff going on, like that is, I have not been able to detect that in any way in any of what I've seen with you. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we we come from Denmark and you are originally Zimbabwean and live in the US. Yeah. But we've been told like all people on the right wing in the US are absolutely batshit insane through the media in Denmark. That's the slant. Like anyone who could even think to vote for Donald Trump should have their head examined and all these things. And this whole thing with race and racism in the US is what's keeping the black man down. So you don't seem to quite believe that is the fact that it's got something to do with race itself.
No, absolutely not. It is a complete lie. And I am testament to that because I actually came to the United States at the age of 19 with nothing but $300 in my pocket and a suitcase full of clothes. And within a decade, I owned my own business that was doing 7 figures in revenue. And I was traveling around the world and had multiple employees. And that's something that really you can only achieve, I think, in the United States. I don't know about Europe, but it's something that the American dream is truly something that is real. And I have lived that, it's something I certainly wouldn't have been able to achieve in such a short period of time in my own country. So I'm really grateful for that, to have been afforded the opportunity to come to the United States. And when I came to the United States, race wasn't even a topic
interesting.
In the United States.
When was that?
That was in 2003. So that was a long time ago. So this whole racial narrative is very brand new. It actually started with Obama in his second term. That's when I started to notice it being used as a political weapon. I mean, obviously the race thing has always been an underpinning thing, but it was never politically weaponized. But Obama was the first person who started to politically weaponize race. And it's ironic because he actually ran on bringing the country together, and he did the exact opposite. He did the exact opposite. And funnily enough, when he became president, I was actually happy, even though I was a conservative, because I've always been very conservative, very traditional. Growing up in Zimbabwe as a Christian and a conservative, I automatically identified with being a Republican when I came to the United States, just based on the policies that they, at least purported to stand for.
Yeah.
So even though I was, identified more with the Republican Party, I was actually happy when Obama got elected, and I kind of overlooked some of his liberal policies. But within about at least halfway through his first term, I was already starting to see how, he was very far left. He was not the centrist that he ran on, he was not the centrist that he kind of portrayed himself to be. And then he started to bring in this racial component to it. And at the time, it wasn't as bad. So 2020 is when I feel like it became mainstream. And it's something that the left has been weaponizing, at least not really on a national basis. It had been more kind of underground, like in the universities, very far left kind of corners of society were already starting with the divide and conquer racial narrative. But in 2020, like we talked about before we got on, the George Floyd tragedy was exploited to really make it a big thing, and it went global. And I'm surprised that even in Denmark, it was a thing.
It was a thing.
It was a thing.
Murals and everything.
Yeah, it was. And it's funny because people in Zimbabwe were also, marching for Black lives. I'm like, you're marching for somebody halfway across the world when you have a president who's Black, who's doing all these things to you. Like, people were not even thinking during that time. And it was actually a time that was very shocking to me to see what was going on, because for the first time, I started to notice that this narrative, was starting to become mainstream, because now I was starting to hear it parroted by my friends, family members, and even my pastor, who was now putting Black Lives Matter stuff all over the church and talking about his white privilege. And I was just in total shock. And a lot of even Christian ministries that I had followed for many years and donated to, and really felt, spiritually fed by, we're now falling into this, rhetoric. And that's what actually prompted me to write my book, Choice Privilege, because it was out of the frustration of seeing it was mostly ignorance, even just with people on the right, people who are Christian, people that I know. And I'm like, do you really understand what this is? Because as somebody who follows politics, I knew that this was a weaponization of race to divide and conquer a nation for Marxism, which is something that has been used, to overthrow all kinds of societies going back in history, the Russian Revolution. Even though maybe it didn't use race, they used economics, to foment a revolution against the haves, the haves versus the have-nots. In Zimbabwe, actually, critical race theory was used, and I didn't even know it was critical race. Now I'm connecting all the dots, because we have a white population in Zimbabwe as well. And they were, by the time I was born, colonization had already ended, and we had a Black president, and Blacks and whites lived together in harmony. And when socialism really started to destroy the country, the president started scapegoating the white farmers as the reason for all the woes in the country. So now, the rhetoric overnight changed from the reason why everything is happening in our country and the reason why you're poor is because of these white people. So it's the same type of narrative that I'm seeing here in the United States.
That's actually quite interesting, because maybe you could tell us a little about what that rhetoric leads to in the end, like what's happened in South Africa and Zimbabwe and these places. What happens to those white minority people?
Well, it's actual devastation for all races, because and that's the tragedy of this, because the division ends up destroying lives for both Black and white, or everybody in the entire country. And we're still living the consequences of that today. And this is almost, 20 years later, and it's actually gotten worse. So basically, when they did that, they used that as an excuse to seize a lot of the white farmers' farms and even white-owned businesses. They came up with the indigenization program of saying, well, if you are an indigenous Zimbabwean, then you have a right to own a certain percentage in every company, even if it doesn't belong to you. You didn't work for it, you didn't build it. It's a socialist, communist policy where you have no respect for private property, basically, is what it was. And it was a redistribution of wealth, which is what we, classic communism and socialism. Yeah. Yes.
I know from a friend in South Africa that a lot of the farmers there got murdered straight out, and
Yes.
so it's not just like they had their property taken from; they also had their lives. And
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's this whole thing with like they pick an idea and then they use that as a spearhead to do all this, whether it's being now it's this crazy gender politics or
And
whatever it is.
we've both been on the far left.
I've been on the very, very far left
And-
my whole life until not so long ago.
And we've just been fed like foie gras geese with this politic that this is the good thing, this is the only right thing, this is inclusiveness, this is everybody. But what I discovered in 2020 during the George Floyd case was that I suddenly said all lives matter. And I didn't know that was a bad thing. And I was really shocked, because then I realized that on the far left, you need to be right in the right way,
Yes.
or else you're not included. And that was just a big shock for me, but it woke me up in the way that now I gathered all my courage and looked at what the Republicans said in America. And I've been taught my whole life that they are the most insane, evil people on the planet. But when I looked at what you wrote and what you think and what you did, I was like, these people are really nice. These are the most inclusive people.
These are the people that volunteer.
You do volunteer work. You say you can be any shape or form or color and gender or whatever you want, just as long as you leave me alone.
Right.
And I will fight for your rights if you want me to. Otherwise, we can just live together. I was like, what? Everything is upside down.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an inversion. Everything has become an inversion of reality. The people that they say are the most inclusive and nice and are really not.
Yeah.
Just everything has become an inversion, and that's this order that has been just put into the world, and because they control so much of the media, and basically what they've done is they have taken over every sphere of influence in America and in the world. So, and they've been able to consolidate power and also consolidate media and information. So if you look back, like in the 1950s here in the United States, you had over 1,500 different media companies. So you turn on, newspapers were independent, so it was just some local guy reporting the news as he saw it, and there were other competitors and so forth. So what they did was they came in and just bought up all those little guys and the small newspapers, and then now it's owned by, the same corporation. So when you look at media in the United States, it went from maybe 1,500 different owners or corporations to only now 6 corporations control all media. So everything that you see, whether it is in print or video, or every news piece of media that is mainstream, is flowing down from 6 giant corporations. So there is no diversity, and those 6 giant corporations are controlled by the same few families that pretty much run this, global order that we're living in. So that means that everybody in every country is just consuming what they want them to see. So you guys in Denmark, you may think that the media that you have there is independent and they're just Denmark media. And so
really
no, if you look far enough down, you'll find out that it flows from those same 6 corporations and those few families that are controlling those 6 corporations. So that way, everybody in Denmark, they may be reading different newspapers, but it's all coming from the same source. And it's all giving them the same narrative and the same information that, conservatives are evil and they're all these things, and they create that perception in the minds of everyone all over the world. And it is the way they've been able to consolidate power by keeping this reality in front of everybody's faces that actually blocks out the real reality of what's really going on.
Yeah.
So
that's
it's not just the news, it's also like the movies and the music and every other sphere of mind influence. But if you ask any of like our friends, they will say these are all like right-wing companies, it's capitalism, and it's but that's not the case.
No.
What?
Oh, go ahead.
No, what is like, how, like, what way do you see us out of this quagmire? Like, I can feel a lot of things going on in the world, and I see a huge movement. But what's your take? What do we do as individuals and as humans to regain our power and come out of all this sovereignty and come out of this mind spell?
Well, it's going to take, I believe that it's going to take, divine intervention, but at the same time, whenever God does something, it's always preceded by human action. So we also have a part to play. So, I as a Christian, I look at this from the lens of, my worldview that, God is sovereign and he is able to intervene in the affairs of men. And that's what gives me hope, because otherwise then I would just be hopeless. Because if you look at what we're up against, it's a huge giant, that we have absolutely no power to overcome unless we have, some sort of divine intervention. And I think of the story of David and Goliath. But David still had to get up. He still had to put the stone. He still had to sling it. But he came at it through the power that he felt God was giving him the power to do it. So that's the way I look at it. So I feel that God is empowering people, even people who are not Christians. And the reason why I say this is that us as the church, people who have received Christ, we have been tasked with a purpose that God has given each one of us, and as the church, to make a difference in the world. And we have failed to do that. The church has failed. It's become very irrelevant. It completely took itself out of every sphere of at least American society. I'm not sure about the European church, but at least the American church has taken itself out of the political conversation. They're just totally irrelevant. So there's a verse in the Bible that says that, it's actually Jesus talking about his wedding, a wedding ceremony where a groom invited some people to his wedding ceremony, and the people that he had invited didn't show up. So he just went out into the highways and byways and just started inviting people off the street. So I feel like that's what has happened, because all the churches now are so dead. They've been infiltrated. They now just going along with all of this. So now God has gone into the highways and byways to get people who may not even know Jesus, but are now becoming voices. People like Joe Rogan, people like Elon Musk. I'm starting to see he's raising people up from the highways and byways. So you don't even have to be somebody who believes in Jesus, but I believe you should, because he is real. He can make himself available to you if you just ask him. Just say, Lord, show yourself to me. And that's going to change your life just by doing that. In your quiet time, you say, God, show yourself to me, and he will reveal himself to you if you're open to it. But besides that, even if you're not a Christian, God is raising people up. The fact that you have awakened to all of this stuff means that God can use you to fight against this. And what you guys are doing by just using your voice, taking a camera, encouraging other people, you're actually doing something. I'm doing something. A lot of people are doing, and that's how we're able to do it. Because if every person who is awakening to all of these things starts to do something, our small collective efforts are going to make a huge difference. And I'll give you an analogy of the American Revolution. It was only 10% of people that were for it, believe it or not. I was shocked to find this out. Yeah, so it was only 10%. About 30% were kind of for it, but they didn't participate in it. And then the rest of the people, another 30% was totally against it. And then there was another 30% that was very indifferent to it. So you're talking about 10% who were extremely dedicated to not overthrowing, but to getting their freedom from the British Empire, because the British Empire had become very authoritarian. And, these people are like, we don't have to live under this. We want to overcome and have our freedom. And it only took that 10%. And for me, that gives me hope, because it means that we don't have to wake up all the masses. But if the few people that are awake, that understand what's going on, are doing their part, I believe that we can overcome this. So that's what gives me hope.
Yay.
Do you have any like concrete steps for people to take, apart from getting on their knees and putting their hands together?
Yes, hands together, getting on your knees is definitely primary. But, each person has different giftings and different passions. So when I look at everything that's going on, it comes out of the 7 spheres of influence. I don't know if you've ever heard of that idea, but
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Okay. So there's actually an evangelist. His name is Lance Wallnau. People can look him up, but he got a revelation from God that the church was supposed to influence the 7 spheres of society in order to disciple a nation, because Jesus Christ said that we should disciple not only people, but we should be discipling nations. And if the church is doing its job, nations are going to be thriving, because you are influencing all these spheres of culture. So the 7 spheres of culture are family, religion, education, business, media, arts and entertainment, and politics. So those are the 7 spheres of society. So I feel that every person, as a Christian and as somebody who is part of the church, we were supposed to be stewarding and influencing those spheres of culture. And if you look back about 50 years in the United States, the church had influence over all those cultures. Whether you look at entertainment, you looked at the entertainment, it was wholesome entertainment. You had a mom and a dad and children, so that was, influenced by the Christian ethos of family. Now you fast forward to 2022, you look at entertainment, you barely see a mom and a dad and children. Now you see a transgender, a gay, and this and that. And that's not something that I say is it's something that I would look at as something that is taking away from the idea of family as far as like Christianity. And it's because we have abdicated our responsibility in influencing culture in the sphere of entertainment, that it has now flipped all the way that way, Yeah. So that's just one example. And then you look at education, you go down the line, you know, you look back in the 50s in the United States, education was largely influenced by the Christian ethos, which taught, I mean, whether you're a Christian or not, the Christian ethos is what has given us the liberty and the freedom and the kind of Western civilization that we live in right now, which is the best period in human history, because it taught us that there's a value in the individual. So kids at school were learning this, that you as an individual are valuable and you're created for a purpose by a God who loves you. And you're supposed to do what is right to your neighbors. You're supposed to love your neighbors. So those are the principles that guided, you know, education and media and entertainment and all these different spheres, and family, which were the Christian Western civilization principles, which have created the best period in human history. So whether you're a Christian or not, you should embrace the Christian ethos, because it's what has created the world we've been living in and enjoying the freedoms and the prosperity because of those principles. So going back to your question, like what can people do that is specific? Well, I believe that any person can look at their personality and their giftings and ask themselves where God has called them to. You know, so you may not want to be completely involved in politics and run for mayor and all that stuff, but maybe you're called to education. Maybe God has put it on your heart, or you feel called to education, or maybe you're called to entertainment, or maybe you're called to, you may be called to politics or stewarding families. You know, families right now, I think there's a crisis in the family mountain, which I think is really at the root of all of this. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
talked to Warren Farrell, who's written The Boy Crisis. And he said something that I saw you say in another podcast, like when you look at what has actually been going on with Black families, like what has been going on is the lack of fathers, like the lack of actually having a family. And when you have families with a missing father, whether that's emotionally or physically, there's so much more risk of the boy not having first of all, he doesn't have a role model, so he doesn't know what it means to be a man. But there's like you see violence, you see so many other things, you see crime going up in areas with fewer fathers. And that doesn't matter if it's a Black neighborhood or a white neighborhood or whatever it is. If the family unit is broken apart, then you see those things that we would say are bad for a society as a whole. Yes. So the whole like separation at all, like separation from in family, but like separation from God and separation from one another. Don't have to meet in a church, but like you have to have a what do you call it, congregation of some sort to meet your neighbors. You have to have some place where you have your neighborhood and take care of one another. You take care of the weak ones, not through paying 50% taxes like we do in Denmark, but like actually seeing somebody feeling bad instead of saying the welfare system will take care of that. It's like, no, I will take care of that. I will take responsibility.
Instead of posting the black square and kneeling before a match,
taking a knee.
Then you can actually go out and do something and be there for people
instead of virtual signaling.
What's that all about?
What is that all about? All those and it changes now. It changes like every month. Then it was first it was the black flag, and then it was the vaccine, and now it's the Ukraine, and then it will
be climate change next.
I think we're gonna have another round of Black Lives Matter before that.
Oh yeah,
but because
it is painful to watch.
Staying connected
up and up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you just saw, head on over to whoselifeisitsummit.com/podcast, where you can find full-length episodes as well as in audio format, and we do a lot of other cool stuff. You can hang out with us and other like-minded individuals who want to create a world that works for everyone. And we do that on our platform where we can chat, and we have Q&As and exclusive interviews as well. So there's so much to get over there. So come on over and play with us.